Using images to communicate new information, photojournalism has shaped the way we view the world since the 19th century. While some say this generally has passed its heyday, as print media has become less popular and that anyone can take photos at any given moment, photojournalists today have been adapting and using new technology and outlets to continue telling the important stories of contemporary society. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at the origins of photojournalism, its journey through different eras, and the issues it still faces today. Hi, I'm Tolani Ogunori, otherly known as Jameto, a professional fashion, stills and street photographer. I started photography as a hobby in 2018, and since then I've been developing my craft and experimenting with different forms of cameras. I've been fortunate enough to work with various creatives, from both young and experienced to social media influencers and artists. It's safe to say I have a genuine passion in learning about photography and reflecting the diverse world we see around us. Which is why I bring you Retrograde, the three-part series where we explore the timeline of photographic history and invite photographers of all levels to enlighten us on their creative journey and predictions of the industry's future. Unlike traditional journalists or reporters, photojournalists document their stories through photography. In other words, it's a form of journalism that gives visual support to a news story. These documentary photographs are delivered to the public through TV, magazines, newspapers, internet, or even on their own. This genre is unique in itself as it is not staged but instead candid. Photojournalists are responsible for capturing the images of a story and presenting it in the most accurate way possible, without influencing a subject's pose or digitally altering an image. The history of photojournalism is strongly connected to the beginnings of photography. Ever since the camera was invented, photojournalists have been interested in documenting the world around them. What comes to mind when you think about photojournalism? Some of us might think of the Second World War. However, photojournalism was born much earlier.
The very first photograph that has been associated with photojournalism was the barricades in Rue Samuel Popincourt from 1848. The photograph was taken by an amateur photographer, especially as photography was hardly a profession in its early stages. Not only did this photograph mark the beginning of photojournalism, but it also documents the June uprising in Paris in 1848. A few years later, the first known photojournalists landed on the scene. Karel Sefmari and Roger Fenton used their cameras to document the Crimean War from 1853 to 1856. Sefmari, a Romanian painter and photographer, exhibited approximately 200 war photographs at the 1855 Paris World Exhibition to great acclaim. The same year, the British government hired the British photographer Roger Fenton to document the war. The government hoped that the photographic images would paint the Crimean War in a positive light and boost the public's morale support for the popular war. This then leads us to 1861, where New York portrait photographer Matthew Brady rose to prominence during the American Civil War. President Abraham Lincoln granted Brady permission to travel to battle scenes, and so he did just that. A team of 24 photographers were assembled by Brady to capture scenes of camp life and the battlefields for Harper's Weekly. Up until this point, photojournalism was dominated by war and its sufferings, as newspapers printed every kind of tragedy known to man. But it was until the 1870s when photojournalists tackled every subject focused on social aspects of society. In 1872, Englishman John Thomson used his camera to highlight social inequalities in Victorian England. From 1876 to 1877, Thomson's piece Street Life in London revolutionised the field by using images as dominant means of storytelling. From the 1930s right through the 1970s, photojournalism saw its golden age as inventions like the flashbulb and the compact Leica 35mm camera made photography more portable than ever. The new Leica gave photographers a lot more freedom and flexibility so that they can be more in the middle of the action. During the golden age, there were a lot of significant moments for photojournalists to document, like the Great Depression, World War II, and social and political movements that have influenced the world in which we live today. By the end of the 1970s, information was becoming more readily available through other media outlets than photojournalism. And so with limited editorial budgets, increasing competition, and the mistrust of the media, these were and still are some of the factors that are impacting this industry. Not to mention technology, as the development of smartphones and the ability to upload images instantly to the web has encouraged a new wave of citizen journalism, to which many people have claimed has made photojournalism dead. But how true is this statement? Is photojournalism at risk?
I think it's only right we meet photographers Yuvan, Fanny and Jordan to tell us about their experiences and their thoughts on the industry as a whole.
Hi, my name is Jordan Peck. I'm a documentary and portrait photographer based in London.
Hello, my name is Fanny Beckman and I'm a photographer who questions the society we live in by art.
Hi, my name is Yuvan Kumar and I'm a photojournalist.
What inspired me to become a photojournalist? I started off taking photos of my mates, just at parties, having raves, just documenting day to day, us skating, us riding BMX and stuff like that. And it was more the fact that one photo can change an entire opinion, like I'd done my dissertation at uni on war photography, specifically the Vietnam War. And you can see how one photo of, say, the burning girl, when she's running along with napalm on her, changed her entire country's opinion on war.
The reason why I wanted to be a photojournalist is because photography has been a massive part of my life. I got my first camera when I was about 4 years old, and when I was a teenager I started to do it more seriously, and I started to be more involved in social issues I saw around in the world, so then I just thought that I wanted to combine it.
My parents would hand us the cameras every now and again, a camcorder for video, point and shoot for stills. And I guess in that sort of learning was just how we saw the world, and then there were no boundaries on what we could do, what we could shoot and not.
I think my take is quite niche. I focus on feminism in my work and sustainability.
I was to really break it down into sort of the aspects of photography that you find in my work. I would then attribute it to a lot of street photography, a lot of travel.
I'm different by such as I still much prefer using film. I'd rather use film, as I believe it's, I wouldn't say purer, it's just nicer to use, and you can't delete photos again afterwards, so every shot has to be what you want and perfect.
When I create my work, I think the angle of storytelling is, it has to be built in, right? As someone that's a journalist as well, so I'm a writer as well, when I'm creating any sort of photo essays or photo series, or even single photographs, there's always this backup in my head that, yeah, I can write something about it.
I approach storytelling for my work as always, I won't stage photos. I don't believe in staging photos. I don't wrong if I'm taking a portrait, I may move a plant pot behind someone just to add something into the image, but I'm not going to do a whole set, make everything. I want someone to be natural in their image, natural who they're trying to portray.
It usually stems from my own frustration in my work. So as I just mentioned, my series Women of My Generation, I've been working on it for quite a long time, and it kind of built up because of my own frustration of seeing the same bodies in the media, but also having conversations with other friends. So I take inspiration from everything that's happening in the world.
Starting out, I'd say find something you're passionate about documenting. Go through and speak to people, connect with people. There's no point just turning up and acting like shoving a camera in people's faces. You need to build that relationship first with them. You need to be able to have some sort of trust between both of you.
My advice for future photojournalists would definitely be do the research and question yourself, why do you want to be a journalist? Is it for selfish reasons? Then you should take a step back and maybe do something else, because this is all about other people's stories and raising the voices that can't speak for themselves.
All I would say is, don't go with what's popular. Try and figure out what you can bring to the table that's new. Because in the end, there's so many people shooting these days that you gotta fight to get out of that sort of, you gotta get through the noise. The future of photojournalism it's just evolving constantly. I think a few years ago, who would have guessed that we would have video become such a big thing? 2021, all I'm hearing is video is where it's at. 15-second videos, 30-second videos. Photography is not going away, but I think photojournalism might have to adapt in many ways to kind of get with the times.
We may get another resurgence in it, and people will be, but it's going to be completely different to what it was before. It's going to be everyone on iPhones, it's going to be passers-by, it's going to be normal public compared to photographers going out there and doing it.
The climate of photojournalism are changing, it's changing a lot, and I think it's going to be a lot on social media. We just have to change the way we look at journalism, because a lot of people say that photojournalism is dead, but it's really not, it just looks differently.
given this whole wave of video and you know, a bit of filmmaking as well that I've done, I wanted a camera that could shoot film. And so I went through to the Nikon mirrorless side, which a lot of people would criticize, but I think it is great. I haven't had a bad experience with mirrorless. So I'm using a Nikon Z Mark II with the kit lens on that as well.
Yeah, so I've had this camera for a really long time actually. I got it when I studied photography back in Sweden, where I'm from. So it's a Nikon D810 and I'm super happy with it, and I think, yeah, since I've had it for so long and all the settings, and I'm really, really comfortable with it. But this lens actually I got quite recently, so it's a Nikon 24-70 VR. As a portrait photographer, and with the project I've spoken about with my generation, I need both wide angle and close-up shots.
Talking from a camera, so I've got the 5.4 Intrepid large format camera, so large format is just a negative which is above, it's either 5x4 inches or 8x10 inches. You can't go even bigger. I personally don't bother, I stay with the 5x4. And then I've got a Mamiya RZ67, which is medium format. So it's a 6:7 ratio.
I feel like these days you really just have to make sure that it's something that's within your budget, something that's obviously making sense for a while because it's an investment at the end of the day, and something that you feel comfortable with. I would definitely say go in store and try something out before you actually get on the streets and try and work with it.
I don't know, it's a difficult one. I tried out a Hasselblad before I brought my Mamiya. A Hasselblad is a 6:6 ratio, so it's a square image, whereas this is 6x7, and the back will rotate, so you can have, well, we'll rotate if I rotate it probably. You can move it around, so you've got different landscape portrait, and that's really what brought me to this.
So actually, I used to work for a camera company called MPB. They trade with used camera equipment, so whenever we got cameras, we purchased cameras, I got to test it and make sure they worked all right. So I tried cameras from all the different brands. I've always used Nikon myself, so I guess that's just because I feel more comfortable with that.
This next one is from a protest that I went to in Mumbai a couple of years ago. You can clearly see a lot of police presence and a Muslim man, and it's basically, the protest was against this massive act that the government was trying to pass, that has eventually passed, which essentially is sort of xenophobic, and at the time didn't seem like it, but people had protested anyway, and you can see here the sentiment that has always existed in India.
It's called My Mate Mix, the documentation of New Age travellers. These are just, when I first started out, I shot a lot in black and white just to see what was going on and just to see what sort of shots I could get. Once I'd done that, I then moved across to colour photography. This is the guy himself. This is Mick. Really nice bloke. He's lived as a New Age traveller for 30 odd years. He used to travel around in the bus, and then they settled 15 years ago, roughly, I think, in a stretch of forest in Suffolk. And that's probably my favourite project to do.
Yes, so this project is actually a few years old. It's called I Just Slipped, and it's about domestic abuse, and it's a collaboration with the women's shelter in my hometown in Sweden. They're all staged, so we collaborated with makeup artists in Malmö. And the reason why they are staged is because obviously it's a safety concern to show the faces of the real victims. But I was a volunteer at the shelter, so all the scars and wounds that you see in the photos are based on real stories from victims of domestic abuse. So I've shown this in Sweden a few times. We exhibited around in Sweden, in the Swedish Parliament, first of all in 2017, but also talked about different prejudices that are around domestic abuse and how we need to spread awareness of it in order to stop it.
I think we can all agree that photojournalists have been the go-to people for documenting and sharing Israel's most important stories with the public. Thanks to Instagram and other social media sites, we're seeing more and more photojournalists standing out from the crowd. While photojournalism is still dealing with the age of the internet, it remains as relevant and important to society as it was then, and has taken on more forms than ever before. Join me on the next episode where I'll be sharing the historical makeup of camera lenses and its influence on the technology standards that we know today.